Welcome back, and in today's video we're making homemade blueberry Pop-Tarts along with mini pies. Let's start by making the filling. We're going to use some frozen blueberries. You can also use fresh blueberries. You would just have to add about 4 tablespoons of water. And in this particular recipe, we don't need to add any water because the frozen berries, as they cook down, they will release that water content. We've added some sugar, and now we're going in and adding some lemon juice. Okay, and again, this recipe will, the ingredients will be listed at the end of the video. Okay, now give these blueberries a quick stir and reduce your heat to medium. Okay, now as the blueberries begin to blister, you want to use a fork or a masher to smash some of the blueberries, and you will begin to get this compote or jelly-like consistency in your pot. If you want to make a blueberry syrup, you can strain off the blueberries and use the liquid portion for what you need it for if you wanted to have blueberry syrup. We're not doing that today. We're going to continue to cook these low and slow, so go ahead and reduce your burner to the lowest setting. Do not cover your pot. We're going to go ahead and start working on the crust. I've already portioned out the flour, and I'm just going to add some salt to that flour. And I'm using the Crisco classic pie crust recipe. This is how I learned how to make pie crust, and I only use this recipe, in fact, to this very day. With this one though, I'm just gonna add some butter to my shortening. So it calls for 3/4 of a cup. I'm gonna use a 1/2 cup of the Crisco vegetable shortening and add a 1/4 cup of butter. Okay, I'm doing this because I prefer the taste of butter to my pie crust. With clean hands, you want to go ahead and start mixing your dough. Now, if you don't want to use your hands, you can use a fork or some sort of other utensil. You'll still need to turn it out at some point in order to really get the flour and butters mixed together well. Now, what you're looking for is a sandy texture at first that you can then grab up into a ball without it crumbling and falling apart. With pie crust, you just need a couple of splashes of water, about 3 or 4 tablespoons. And again, all of the ingredients will be listed at the end of the video for you to take a screenshot. I'm gonna now take this ball of dough and wedge it in between 2 pieces of parchment paper in order to flatten the dough out. This way we'll have workable dough in order to divide it up for the Pop-Tarts and for the mini pies. You want your pie crust to be about 1/8 of an inch thick, but no one's measuring. Just look at how thick it is here in the clip. Now let's take this same dough and put it in the fridge. Now the recipe that I just created from the Crisco pie crust, it created 2 pie crusts. I just worked with one on camera and the other one off camera. The second pie crust is one is for the actual bottom of the mini pies, and the other one is to top the pies off with. Okay, and then with the leftover dough that we'll have, we'll make the Pop-Tart crust. Okay, now what I want to point out here is something that happens to even the best chefs or best home cooks out there, is that pie crust can have the potential to fall apart. Okay, pie dough texture is equivalent to Play-Doh. All you have to do is patchwork it together, meaning you take this piece of dough here, patch it up with that piece of dough, and it will work out just fine. And I'm now showing you here where I have a perfectly formed piece of pie dough that still tore. Okay, so that's not a big deal. Some people will throw the entire recipe away thinking that they've messed up majorly. No, keep working that dough because pie dough, or pie crust rather, is extremely forgiving. Now let's take a look at our blueberry filling. I didn't add anything to thicken this up. Just by allowing this to sit on the stove uncovered to cool off, worked. Okay, and we have this congealed like texture that's jellied, and it's going to stay firm inside of the pie dough, and it's not going to be all runny and loose. Okay, now here's that second pie crust that I told you about. I'm going to go ahead and use just a regular drinking glass to portion out the tops that's going to go on top of the miniature pies, okay? I have all sorts of tools that I work with in the kitchen, but then there are some things that I do that are just, easy and just make sense. The circumference of that glass that I used, the drinking glass, it was the perfect circumference that I needed to top off my pie crust, okay? So work with what you got, but if you have all of the special tools that you need, that's even better. But don't stress over not having something. Just work with what you have. That brings me to my next point. I'm just using the back of a fork to put some indentations into the edges of the pie crust, just to give it some identity, give it a little bit of character, and that's it. Again, working with the tools that you already have is one thing that'll keep you happy and not stressing in the kitchen. Now I'm just taking a little paring knife and putting some slits in the pie. This can be looked at as a decoration, which it is to a degree, but it's also a ventilation system to keep the steam from bursting open your pies and escaping through those slits. Now, the moment that most of you probably came here for. Let's see how we make these homemade Pop-Tarts. Okay, so those discs that we made earlier using that drinking glass, we have a few of those left over. And so now I'm just stretching them out with the rolling pin into like an oval shape, okay? Now, the first hand pie that I do is not gonna look pretty in the beginning. I'm gonna be honest about that. But pie crust, again, is very forgiving, okay? You wanna roll it out to 1/8 of an inch thick like we did earlier, okay? And now we just need to go ahead and add some of the filling. You want to avoid the edges by about 1 inch or so. And just like a previous video, I went outside of the parameters just a little bit, but we're going to keep moving. That's what the beautiful thing about working in the kitchen and doing things from scratch is that you get a chance to practice and perfect your craft, okay? So don't be afraid to make mistakes and don't be afraid to be honest about them, I am not a professionally trained chef. I'm a home cook and I'm a proud home cook. And I'm not trying to ever take the title of someone who spent a large portion of their life actually gaining an education to do what I'm doing here. But I also respect myself and I'm very proud of where I am. So celebrate yourself wherever you are on this journey in life and just live in that moment. Now here is the Pop-Tart that's going to resemble the one that we're all familiar with, the commercial brand one. I'm going to just go ahead and make my indentations in it with the fork, and then I'm going to slice off the edges to form a rectangular shape. Since our pie crust is so thin and those blueberries are so dark, they're showing through here in this clip, but once you bake them, you won't even notice, okay? Now let's go ahead and take our pies out of the fridge because you need them to be cool in order to cut some slits into them, okay? We're just gonna brush on an egg wash. An egg wash is simply water, a splash of water mixed with an egg. We mix the water with the egg to prevent the egg from caking up on top of the pastry. And the egg is used in order to give a shiny gloss and appearance to the Pop-Tart and the pies. Now, I did put them both in the oven at the same time. Hello there. Can you guys see me through my pot there? I baked the Pop-Tarts on 375 for 15 minutes. And then I baked the miniature pies for 25 minutes. I did stop them at the 20-minute mark, but I wanted them to have a little more golden appearance. So I put them back in there for 5 more minutes. So 25 minutes would do for those miniature pies. Now, I want to thank you at this point because a lot of people don't make it to the end. Thank you so much for being here, okay? All right, so here are the pies straight out of the oven. So we see that, remember earlier I told you that I went too far to the edges. That's why you have that blistering there on that oval shaped Pop-Tart, but the rectangular one, it came out perfectly, okay? So I went on ahead and I sprinkled some powdered sugar on it just to give it a little bit more character and also a little more flavor. And when I tell you this recipe does not disappoint, you will be pleased. If you like Pop-Tarts, then you may even consider making this recipe often because the flavors just do not compare. Most home cooked items, they are truly far superior than the knockoff brands or the ones that are made in the store. Okay, and this is the miniature pie. Now that filling, I usually don't like a lot of filling. I'm not a thick filling kind of person, but I must admit it was a perfect amount. It was just enough bite and not overwhelming. Okay. And here's the final look at everything, all put together, looking so cute. My children, they were anxious to try them, and they actually liked them. This was their first time having it. So thank you again for watching, and come back, okay?